Nevada has more ghost towns than any other state in America, over 600 of them scattered across a desert that swallows everything eventually. These aren't the ones on the tourist maps. These are the ones the state quietly forgot. 11. Rhyolite. In 1904, a prospector named Shorty Harris picked up a piece of green-stained rock in the hills above Death Valley and changed everything. Within 3 years, the town of Rhyolite had 10,000 people, a stock exchange, 3 newspapers, an opera house, and a train station with stained glass windows. Banks competed for deposits. Speculators arrived from San Francisco and New York, convinced they were watching the next great American city rise from the desert floor. The gold ran out faster than anyone admitted. Mining companies kept issuing glowing reports to keep stock prices from collapsing. But the ore grades were dropping, the costs were rising, and the men who understood the numbers quietly started selling. By 1910, the population had fallen to a few hundred. By 1916, the last resident was gone. The train station they'd spent a fortune on had operated for less than 8 years. The bank building still stands today, 3 stories of stone and concrete, windowless, open to the sky. A bottle house built by a miner named Tom Kelly from 50,000 beer and liquor bottles is still intact. The desert preserved what the people abandoned and left it exactly where they dropped it. 10. Unionville. In the winter of 1861, a young man named Samuel Clemens arrived in Unionville, Nevada, convinced he was about to get rich. He had come with a pickaxe, a mule, and the absolute certainty that silver mining was simple. He spent weeks digging in the frozen ground of Buena Vista Canyon, found almost nothing, and eventually quit. He went on to become Mark Twain. He wrote about the whole humiliating experience in Roughing It, his memoir of the Nevada Silver Rush, with the particular self-awareness of someone who had survived his own delusions. What Twain missed was that Unionville actually produced. The town became a legitimate silver camp through the 1860s, with a post office, a courthouse, and enough permanence that families put down real roots. Mills ground ore from the surrounding hills. Streets were surveyed and named. But the richest ore came out in the early years, and when the grade dropped, the capital went with it. By the 1880s, Unionville was hollowing out. Today, fewer than 20 people live there. A handful of original adobe buildings still stand in the canyon. One of them was Twain's. He would have found the irony satisfying. 9. Belmont. When silver was discovered in the Toquima Range in 1865, Belmont grew fast enough to become the seat of Nye County, Nevada. That meant courtrooms, county offices, and the kind of institutional permanence that convinced people a town was built to last. At its peak, 2,000 people lived there. The combination mine was pulling out ore worth hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Merchants set up shops, a brewery opened, doctors and lawyers arrived, which is usually the sign that a mining camp has crossed into something more serious. The courthouse they built in 1876 is still there. 2 stories of brick and mortar, with the original floors intact, the original woodwork still attached to the walls. Nobody locked the door when they left, and nothing has been removed in the century and a half since. Belmont became a ghost town before the county seat was moved to Tonopah in 1905, and the courthouse simply stayed. The Nevada State Historic Preservation Office owns it now. You can walk through the same rooms where Nye County conducted its official business in the 1870s, and the doors will open for you because nobody ever bothered to close them. 8. Berlin. Berlin, Nevada was a silver mining town that shut down in 1911. That would be a complete and unremarkable story except for one thing nobody knew when the miners were there. 225 million years earlier, an ichthyosaur had died in the same hills they were tunneling through, and its fossilized bones were lying in the rock a few hundred feet from their shafts. The miners never found them. A University of Nevada professor did in 1954, and the discovery turned a forgotten silver camp into something genuinely strange. Nevada has since made the ichthyosaur its state fossil, and Berlin Ichthyosaur State Park now preserves both the mining town and the fossil site within the same protected area. The mine structures are still standing. The ore processing equipment sits where it was left when the price of silver made the operation unviable. And a short distance away, the bones of creatures that lived before the dinosaurs went extinct are exposed in the earth exactly where they fell. The men who worked in Berlin spent years digging in those hills and never knew what was beneath them. That kind of accidental proximity to something enormous is hard to shake. 7. Candelaria. Candelaria was one of the most productive silver camps in Nevada history. From 1864 through the 1890s, the mines there produced millions of dollars in ore, and the town built up everything that production demanded. Mills, a railroad spur, saloons, a Wells Fargo office, and a cemetery that filled faster than most towns of its size. The Northern Bell mine alone generated enough revenue to attract investors from as far as London. For a stretch of years in the 1880s, Candelaria was Nevada's busiest mining operation. Almost nothing is left. The desert took it back more completely than almost any other Nevada ghost town. The adobe buildings dissolved in the rain over the decades. The wooden structures burned or collapsed. The railroad ties were pulled up for salvage. What remains are foundations, tailings piles, a handful of structural fragments, and the cemetery, where the headstones of people who lived and died at the height of Candelaria's boom are still readable if you know where to look. The town that generated millions exists now almost entirely in the historical record. The desert doesn't leave much behind when it decides to reclaim something. 6. Gold Point. Gold Point is not fully abandoned, and that distinction matters. Discovered in 1868 and mined intermittently for decades, the town went through multiple boom and bust cycles, each one shorter than the last. By the 1970s, it appeared finished. Then in 1998, a man named Herb Robbins bought most of the town and started restoring it, not as a museum, but as a functioning historical site where people can actually stay in the original buildings. The structures Robbins restored are authentic. Original mining-era cabins and equipment sheds that had been sitting empty for decades turned into rentable accommodations. He moved in himself. A small permanent population followed. Today, Gold Point sits in the peculiar category of places that are technically alive while existing entirely in the world of 1870. There's no cell service. A generator provides what electricity there is. The saloon runs on weekend nights. What makes Gold Point genuinely unusual is that its survival came down to one person's decision, not a government program or a historic designation. Herb Robbins bought a ghost town and simply refused to let it die. 5. Hamilton. The silver discovery at White Pine in 1867 triggered one of the most intense short-term migrations in Nevada history. Within 2 years, Hamilton had 10,000 people. Journalists called it the richest silver district in the world. The town built up so fast that construction couldn't keep pace with demand, and men slept in shifts on the same cots in rooming houses that never went dark. Speculators bought lots unseen. A weekly newspaper listed real estate transactions the way a financial paper lists stock prices. The ore gave out almost immediately. By 1873, the realistic mining operations had stopped. A fire tore through what remained of the business district, and by 1885, Hamilton was effectively finished. The courthouse burned in another fire. The buildings that survived fell to vandals, salvagers, and weather over the following century. What remains today is scattered foundation stone in the hills above White Pine County, a cemetery with wooden markers slowly disappearing into the sagebrush, and the outline of streets you can still trace in the terrain if you know what you're looking at. Hamilton lasted long enough to matter in the historical record, and not much longer than that. 4. Ioni. Ioni was established in the 1860s as a silver camp in the Shoshone Mountains, and it went through the pattern every Nevada mining town went through: a rush, a boom, a collapse, an attempt to revive, another collapse. What makes one different is that it never fully surrendered. Through every cycle, a small number of people stayed. During the quiet years, ranching kept a thread of economic activity alive in the valley. When silver markets shifted, a few operations reopened. The population never grew large, but it never went to zero either. Today, Ioni has a population officially listed around 100, making it one of the most persistently inhabited former mining camps in Nevada. Old buildings coexist with newer structures in a way that gives the town a layered quality you don't find in places that were simply abandoned and preserved. Ioni didn't become a ghost town because the people who stayed kept making the decision not to leave. That stubbornness, sustained over more than a century, produced something unusual: a genuine community built on the memory and occasional reality of mining. still holding on at the edge of the Nevada desert. 3. Midas. Midas is about as remote as a town in the continental United States can be. Located in Elko County in the northeastern corner of Nevada, it sits at the end of a long dirt road through a country that feels genuinely empty in a way most of the American West no longer does. Gold was discovered there in 1907, and the rush that followed brought a few thousand people to a place that had no reason to exist except that the ore grades were extraordinary. The Elko Prince Mine made men wealthy. The town built up fast and dreamed of permanence. By the 1930s, the accessible ore was exhausted, and the dream was over. The population dropped to single digits. What remained was a post office that somehow stayed open, a handful of people who found reasons to stay, and the peculiar stillness of a place the modern world simply passed by. Midas still has a small caretaker population today, and the original buildings that survived sit in the valley in various states of preservation. The drive out takes you through a country that hasn't changed much since the miners arrived. The isolation that made Midas hard to reach in 1907 is the same thing that preserved what it left behind. 2. Metropolis. Metropolis was not a mining town. That's the first thing to understand about why its story is different from every other entry on this list. In 1910, a company called the Pacific Reclamation Company purchased 40,000 acres in Elko County, built an irrigation system fed by Bishop Creek, and began aggressively marketing farm plots to settlers across the country. The brochures promised fertile land, reliable water, and a ready-made city. The company built a hotel, a school, a post office, and a main street. Families arrived from the Midwest, bought their plots, and started farming. The water was never sufficient. The soil was alkaline. The promised canals ran dry in drought years. The Pacific Reclamation Company had sold something that didn't exist, and the families who had uprooted their lives to get there figured that out, slowly and painfully over the following decade. By the 1920s, Metropolis was emptying. By the 1940s, it was finished. The hotel is gone. The school burned in 1947. Jackrabbits have taken over the fields that were supposed to feed a booming Nevada city. The cemetery remains with headstones for people who arrived believing a promise and died before they could leave. Metropolis is what happens when the lie is the town itself. 1. Palmetto. Palmetto sits in Esmeralda County on the edge of the California border, and almost no one knows it exists. Silver was discovered there in 1866, and the camp produced enough ore to justify mills and a small permanent settlement through the early 1870s. The mines went quiet. They reopened in the 1880s. They went quiet again. A third attempt came in the early 1900s. Each time, the ore grades didn't justify the cost of operating somewhere that remote, and each time the effort collapsed and the equipment was left where it stood. What makes Palmetto different is the accumulation of those failed attempts. There are structural remnants from 3 distinct eras of occupation, layered on top of each other in the high desert, far enough from any paved road that most people never make the drive. Stone foundations from the 1860s sit alongside collapsed wooden structures from the 1880s, alongside mill equipment from the early 1900s. The place reads like an archaeological site, each layer a distinct chapter of optimism that didn't survive contact with the actual geology. Nevada is full of places that prove the desert's patience outlasts human ambition. Palmetto is one of the most honest examples of that truth, sitting in the hills exactly where history left it, waiting for the very small number of people who will ever think to look. Nevada has over 600 ghost towns on record, and historians admit that number is probably low. Every one of them is a version of the same story. Something was found. People came. The thing ran out. The people left. But the details inside that structure are never the same twice. A courthouse no one locked. A bottle house built from 50,000 liquor bottles. A land company that sold water that didn't exist. A miner who failed and became Mark Twain. The desert preserves what it wants and erases the rest, and what it chooses to keep is almost always more interesting than what the brochures ever promised.